When I was a kid, and in 1967, 68, I started buying Marvel superhero comics. The Avengers, Silver Surfer, Daredevil, Spider-Man, X-Men. Totally fascinated by them, like nothing ever since. And I still to this day am completely entranced by Silver Age Marvel comic books. 61 to 70, pretty much. And for the last 7, 8 years, my work has been about trying to get at the core of that fascination. Trying to apprehend the elemental qualities that continue to enchant me. And certainly speed, an ecstasy of power, weightlessness, transformation, becoming more than human or other than human, cracks in reality, ruptures in time-space. So my work is about expressing all of this stuff viscerally. From a technical viewpoint, I'm working with the color and line, color with a black holding line, standard comic book cartooning technique. And my color sense is influenced by the old colors on newsprint, more faded colors on newsprint of the 60s comic books. But my methodology derives from something completely different, which was the advent of a different kind of superhero comic books in the 90s. Comic books aimed at the collector's market, printed on high-quality paper, using what was then fairly new computer coloring processes, which enabled for all kinds of special effects. Aesthetically, they had changed too. The comic book heroes had become sort of demonic. The harbinger of that was Wolverine, who was a clawed superhero who, by implication, shredded his opponents in a horrifying bloodbath. They didn't actually do that in comics until some years later, but that was the hint. And the young comic artists coming up who were doing these new demonic superhero comics, they had a decadent, fetishized drawing style. In the 1990s, I noticed a change in comics. The new generation of superhero comic artists had learned to draw exclusively from drawing comics. They were actually my generation. They didn't have the classical training that the baby boom generation, or I should say the World War II generation comic artists have, who created Marvel comics. They were starting from the exaggerations of form that Jack Kirby did at Marvel Comics and working forward from there. And they became decadent and fetishistic. They started making ridiculously ripped superhero bodies, far beyond anything that had been done before, filling up the whole panel with muscle, abstract muscle, completely fictitious muscle, buckles and belts and harnesses and straps and all kinds of weaponry. Their lack of classical training seemed to create sometimes a loss of distinction between foreground and background. They put so much detail in the background that it competed with the foreground, and I started seeing them as abstractions. And I started cutting into them with an X-Acto knife, searching for new shapes that were within the shape, using the lines that were there, but cutting across the indicators of the narrative content. And then I would take these pieces, these fragments, and shuffle them around, and this is what I still do, and I make a collage. And that collage becomes the model for the drawing or painting. Usually takes about 3 days to make a collage for some reason. That's really consistent. And it's an odd process. As soon as I dump all the fragments out on the table in a pile, they look really good, but not quite there. And then to get them from not quite to a collage that seems to be a successful new entity takes 3 days. Once I have one, I typically do a few versions of it. Usually a gouache on paper first, sometimes a canvas, sometimes a mural, sometimes a version just with black line without the color. I don't show the collages, or I never have. Something in the transformation is important. I'm not sure if the collages, they look like finished works. But I don't know. Maybe they're not quite my finished work yet. Another influence came about in the 90s when I was not doing this kind of work at all. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was doing performance art. I did some writing. Some friends of mine and I started a community mural project on the alley that we lived on. It's called the Clarion Alley Mural Project. It's in San Francisco. I wasn't a painter at all at that time, so I was just an administrator, and I was facilitating a lot of other people producing murals on this alley, both classical muralists, like guys from the Chicano mural movement, and younger artists. Some people doing their first mural, some people working in an underground cartoon comic style, a lot of spray can artists. And I was absorbing all these different approaches, and I noticed that there was a lot of vitality at that time in the spray can art scene and in muralists, artists, spray can artists, vandals, criminals who were working illegally. And their work had different formal attributes. It was frameless and backgroundless. It was designed to float on the wall. And it competed with all the other criminal artworks. And if it wasn't very good, somebody would cover it up. So it was competitive. It was Darwinian. It had to be done under adverse conditions because it was illegal, so it had to be done fast. Some of them were influenced by comics like I was. So I just thought about this for a long time, for years. And I never took up a spray can. It didn't appeal to me, but I did start doing traditional murals. I did some labor history murals, a couple of other things, standard figurative paintings, a little bit satirical, political. And that's how I learned to paint, which came in handy later.